Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon, and today we're looking at a Mega Mewtwo deck. I think, hopefully you can see my face by the way, and the timing is all good. I've tried my best. I've moved on to a desktop, so hopefully it all works. Fingers crossed we can get this show on the road on a more permanent basis. But yeah, this is going to be Mega Mewtwo, a very interesting deck that's been doing well in the UK right now, cities-wise. It's won back-to-back cities, and it's also top cut multiple as well, so clearly there's something behind it. I know that some of the best players in the UK right now are backing it, and they think it's a worthwhile deck to pick up and use, so clearly it has some legs to it, and let's look at the deck. It has a very simple premise, and it's actually similar to Sceptile, in that the main premise of the deck is it's very difficult to hit one-hit knockouts on the Mega. 210 HP is a lot to get through for a lot of decks. Think about stuff like Charizard Entei, stuck at 170 maximum. Yveltal can, yes it can hit up to 210, but it has to really commit. Definitely in Standard when there's no lasers to help you get there. It's a huge commitment for Yveltal to get there. Every other attacker in that deck can't either. So Mewtwo's normally going to be sitting pretty and tanking hits. Think about Mega Manectric, regular Manectric even. All these things are way out of range of 210. The only thorn in the paw of Mewtwo, there's two really. One of them is going to be Night March. Mewtwo basically also loses Night March. The only reason it's been doing well in the UK right now is because probably like the most popular deck people are playing is Manectric Crobat, and that's like a hard counter to Night March. So basically no one's playing Night March at the moment because of the popularity of Manectric Bats, and this really paved the way for Mewtwo to do well. So basically we're going to try and tank with this 210 HP, and we're going to use Mewtwo EX's second attack, Damage Change, for 2 Psychic and a Colorless, so it's a pretty expensive attack, but it does allow you to switch all damage counters with this Pokemon onto your opponent's active. So if you have damage and your opponent's active has 0 damage, you get to move all the counters and put it onto them. That's like the main way we're going to try and abuse this attack. Obviously, if your opponent does have heavy damage on it, you can't use Damage Change because you'll just then receive that damage. So there's a time and a place to use Damage Change. It's also important to note we do have the first attack, Shatter Shot, 30 times the number of Psychic attached to Mewtwo. It can also be a decent utility attack for early game pressure against lower HP stuff. Definitely stuff like bats, you can end up knocking them out quite easily. So it's all about the attacks on the lower stage Mewtwo. Obviously we're maxing out Shrine of Memories, which I'll get onto in a moment, so that we can use this Mewtwo's attack whilst we are in the Mega Evolution. So the Mega does also have a very important attack, Psychic Infinity. This is like the really overpowered X-Ball. When we first saw this Mega Mewtwo, everyone thought this was going to be a new staple, a new frontman of the format. It didn't really turn out that way, but a few players have found out how to make this guy work. Psychic Infinity, for just a double Colorless, does 10 plus 30 more damage times the amount of energy attached to both active Pokemon. So it technically has a base of 70 if you're using the 2 energy to attack with, and that gets way higher as you start attaching using stuff like Mega Turbo, and your opponent obviously has to commit energy to their dudes. So one downside is it's not affected by weakness. I guess it's a downside and a plus, because otherwise there'd be Mewtwo Wars like crazy. But it does make us not as favourable against stuff like Lucario, although you can just win by using Damage Change anyway. So there we are. The Psychic Infinity is an important attack if your opponent is just choosing not to attack you, because sometimes they'll just pass their turn away in fear of getting hit with Damage Change. You can keep pressure on with Psychic Infinity. You can keep stacking up Mewtwo's really big and start taking massive KOs. So the whole emphasis is Mewtwo. That's why we have a thick line of a 4-3 split. This is the full art, but it's still the Damage Change Mewtwo. So yeah, the whole emphasis is on this card really. You can see everything else is just text to help us remain consistent. So we have Hoopa. It's all about Scoundrel Ring. It's great in all Mega decks basically to get into our Mewtwo pieces. And this is no different. I mean, we do have the Psychic Energy, but there's never going to be a point where you use Hyperspace Fury. So there we are. Hoopa's there for that. 2 Shaymin EX to keep us drawing into new cards. Setup is great. We have DCE for Sky Return if we need to do it, to maybe deny prizes, because it's great if you can force people, like as long as you can people will try and Lysandre around Mewtwo if they can't one-hit it. It's just a natural sort of response how to play around it, take prizes elsewhere. So if you can DC Shaymin and literally have a board of one Mewtwo, or maybe two Mewtwo. One Mewtwo's a bit scary if they just drop a cheeky attacker, but what I'm trying to say is if you can Sky Return away those prizes, it really forces your opponent to go through the Mewtwo's, and it's very difficult for a lot of decks to do that. So that's why you have two Shaymin. I've also opted for a single Cresselia in here. Not really too much as an attacker. It does have the energy to attack in this deck. Moonlight gain 70, and you get to heal 20. I mean, it's nothing spectacular for that energy cost, and Mewtwo really does suck up the amount of energy because each damage change is 2 Psychic and a Colorless, and often you're using DCE anyway for Psychic Infinity. So it's rare you use Cresselia as an attacker. It's just that it technically has free retreat with the ability My Way, because we max out our stadium lines, and most other decks are going to play, you know, at least one stadium. So oftentimes Cresselia does have free retreat, so it's nice to have the free retreat option in the deck. It's like the most health on a free retreater, so like this could be a Dunsparce, this could be a Hawlucha, maybe even Hawlucha just to sort of psych out your opponent, make them think that you're playing both sets of Mewtwo Megas. That could be an interesting play, but Cresselia, the most healthy free retreater that we have, and it does have the energy in the deck to attack with, so I feel like this is worthwhile just because it's a non-EX, and it can, you know, force people into 7 prize games. When you have no other outs, you can just use like an Ace Trainer or some other hand disruption like Hex, and then force them to have a Lysandre, and it's not always going to be the case, so it can be a win condition just having a single non-EX in the deck, so I like making the space for one of these guys. Onto the trainers now. It's really simple. 3 Battle Compressor. It really works nicely with Mega Turbo, so we dump some of our Psychic Energy for acceleration, and we do have a couple of tech supporters in here as well. Not too many techs. This deck really is like a one-trick pony. It doesn't have much to do, it just does it very effectively. It's all about damage change, and if they're not playing around that, you can Psychic Infinity anyway, so it's all about the Mewtwo. You really don't need much else going in the deck. So we are maxing out Mega Turbo. Like I've said, Mewtwo's attacks are very expensive. Mega Turbo helps us get there a lot quicker. So maxing out Trainer's Mail for consistency. Similar reason why we are playing maximum Ultra Ball. Ultra Ball into Hoopa is just the nuts, basically. You get so much value out of every single Ultra Ball that it's perfect. Really helps you chain double Mewtwo's, which is pretty much all you need to win games. It's almost like a Groudon in how it plays, where you just set up big Megas, and normally 2 is going to get you through a game, sometimes even 1 in matchups where they literally just can't deal with Mewtwo, so there we are. 4 VS Seeker to respam our important supporters, and it works with Compressor combo to try and get into supporters and never have dead hands. We are playing the 1-of Ace Trainer. This is just because we're a slow deck, like we're not getting big damage from Psychic Infinity very early on in the game, and damage change is never going to be doing too much until they start swinging in our face, so we can use Ace Trainer just to disrupt them if one of our Mewtwo's has gone down, and then hopefully we can draw in 2 pieces to get us into our Mega Evolution, so it can really help us stabilize. It's like the only card we have in the deck to help us out against Night March. The deck is a horrible Night March matchup. I didn't actually mention the second deck that I said. There's 2 decks that really punish this. First one's Night March, because Pumpkaboo hits for weakness and just destroys it. The second one's Vespiquen. It's not quite as awful as Night March. Like, Night March is pretty much an auto loss. But Vespiquen, with enough Pokemon, can obviously do the one-shot thing as well and start bursting through these Mewtwo's really easily. So it's times like that when Ace Trainer can really help you out, force them into potentially bad hands, and then you can sort of sneak a win that way. That's really the only option the deck has to win these games, other than using Hex Maniac, which we play 2 of, to try and, again, ruin their setup. Vespiquen is very reliant on Shaymin and Unknown, definitely even the Vileplume variant. If you can get Hex Maniac going and set up 1 Mewtwo, you're probably going to win that game. So playing 2 is really nice. Again, for Night March, if you can Compressor away a Hex early, or just find it on your own with 2 Hex in the deck and 4 Trainer's Mail, and with like Shaymin drawing you into it, there's decent odds of you hitting Hex turn 1, even with just 2 in the deck. It can really slow down the development of things, and it's one reason why this deck is so successful. You have a space for 2 Hex, and 2 Hex right now in a format where Entei is highly reliant, Night March is highly reliant, A lot of decks are really reliant on Shaymin right now, and they've like switched out a lot of supporter-based draw for Shaymin in high counts, and that's where Hex Maniac can really punish it. We are playing 1AZ, get reusage out of Shaymin and Hoopa. It's like what I was saying with the Sky Return play. You want to negate those prize targets on the bench, get them out of the way, force them into Mewtwo's, because it's very awkward for them to do that. And obviously just reusing setup, so it's basically like a draw supporter a lot of the time anyway. We're playing 2 Lysandre. This is a really big card to play in here, because there are times when people are going to be two-shotting you. So imagine you're up against Mega Manectric. This is a classic example. So you get hit with a Mega Manectric for 110 damage. You damage change it onto the Mega. Then they come back and hit you with Turbo Bot again for another 110. So this turn for us, we can't use damage change because we will be on the same amount of damage because we both have 110 on us at this point. So we need to have Lysandre so that we can pick up things like Shaymin's, heal ourselves, and take 2 prizes at the same time. That's pretty nuts. That's like the biggest reason why Mewtwo is so good right now. A lot of cards in format are good because they hit good numbers, naturally. So things like Mega Manectric, it hits this magic 110, which can kill Shaymin's, and you know, it 2-shots pretty much everything. So if we just Lysandre around, now we're using damage change to heal us of that damage and do the same thing back to them. So pretty awesome. Yeah, 2 Lysandre I feel is definitely worth it in here. You've seen a few decks that I've been doing recently where I cut down to 1, but just for the heal alone, sometimes you're not taking the prize, but you just need to heal your Mewtwo. For that reason alone, it can be really worth having 2 Lysandre and having access to these other Pokemon on the bench that are full of, or have no damage on them, that we can just move it over and basically buy ourselves another turn with our Mega Mewtwo, which is perfect. 4 Sycamore for consistency, 4 Shrine of Memories. Again, I keep saying how damage change is how we win the game, so we want to max out Shrine so that we can actually use that and win the Stadium War against pretty much everything else. It's important to max out 4 as well, because then it makes it slightly more awkward for Pumpkaboo. I guess if we are using Ace Trainer in combination with keep replacing the Stadium, sometimes you can make it so Pumpkaboo can't knock us out, and then it forces Joltik to actually have like everything in the discard pile. I think Luke Kirkham's one of the main players who has come up with this style of the Mewtwo deck, a UK player. He's like on the highest point total right now in the UK. And I think he has beaten Night March a couple of times. I think it's more out of luck than anything else, but you can see why, like, even though it's a god-awful matchup, there are tiny outs for you by using Ace Trainer and trying to replace the Stadium. But if you expect Night March at any event, you can't play Mewtwo because it's mainly going to be losses. Like, it's got to be like a 90-10 matchup, something like that. Anyway, we have 4 Spirit Links. We want to get into the Mega as quickly as possible because it gives us an extra 40 HP and the extra attack if they're not hitting us yet. So pretty useful. I feel like maxing out is the right play. Even though we're only playing 3 Megas, I think it makes sense for me. I think you could play 4 Mega. I don't think that's a bad play at all. You might want to trim down a Psychic Energy. You could just not play the Cresselia. I personally like it just for the extra option. If people are trying to just do the Lysandre round play, people will fall into the trap of doing it, thinking like, oh, I can't kill this Mewtwo this turn, but the Cresselia is in range, so let's just kill Cresselia. They've not helped themselves in terms of prize state at all, because they still have to get through all EXs now in our deck. And we don't have to use damage change that turn either. We can hit them with a Psychic Infinity, which is often doing more damage than they would have been anyway. So Cresselia is almost like a bait a lot of the time, so I do like it in here. You could cut down on some other things, maybe cut down a Mail. I'm happy with the supporter line as is. I don't think I'd change anything else in the deck other than maybe cut an energy for a Mega. That's only if you're struggling. You could also just take away an energy for a Super Rod. I guess that makes more sense. That would probably be the only change I would make to the deck as of right now. The energy is super simple. For DCE, Psychic Infinity is perfect. Can retreat us out of Hoopa because that's often a target. And obviously the Psychic Energy works with Mega Turbo. Obviously it's all of our attacks. So let's look at some techs. I've talked about how the list is like super tight and there's not too many things you might want to play. But Zoroark is one of the things that could sneak its way in here. As a 1-1 or a 2-2, instead of the Cresselia, you get the stand-in with Floatstone to then never be Lysandre stalled. You can move through your Mewtwo's as you please. Again, getting these two Mewtwo developed so that even if there's times when you can't damage change off one of them to like a good target, you can like stand in retreat, go into a different Mewtwo, start using Psychic Infinity on that one, force them to have Lysandres, force them to go for a second Mewtwo basically. Zoroark makes that a bit nicer for us, and we have the additional attack of Mind Jack. We're already playing 4 DCE, so this can come into play quite often for us, so it's a really nice attack to have, I think. And it's a good thing that we've been seeing in a couple of the decks. The break is an interesting one. Like, you can't... I've seen people try and play with Dark Energy and other sorts of energy. It doesn't work, but you could play Smeargle and a Dark for foul play, but I think at that point you're just losing too many consistency cards. The other Pokemon that I would consider is, if I could type... God, my hands are freezing, because if you can tell, I'm in a different room, just because this is my desktop. But yeah, I ended up being able to type out Jirachi. This is another tech that you could consider. Stardust, again, it's that tiny little help against Night March, forcing them to have more DCs, forcing them to have Lysandres. It's a tiny little thing that you could use. I feel like Night March is so unrecoverable that you're just wasting your time having Jirachi. Although it could also help you out against Vespiquen Vileplume, and it could help you out against Toad as well. So those are sorts of things that you might want to play around, because although Toad may seem really bad, like, you do have a lot of time against Toad. Even though you don't have Mega Turbo available, their damage is so pitiful in Standard right now because they don't have laser support that we have time to just not even Mega Evolve and just keep damage changing as long as we aren't getting hammered away constantly. So there is that option. You don't really need the Jirachi for that, and especially because everything's so chunky in this deck other than Cresselia. It'll be hard to time a Jirachi well, if that makes sense. So those would be the only tech options I'd consider. Maybe something like a Giovanni, but again, your main attack is damage swap, and that's not based on damage, that's placing counters, which interestingly enough gets you around Focus Sash, so that's something good to be aware of. But that is the deck. A couple of techs, but overall I think it's a pretty tight list, even though it's really spacious, if that makes sense. You just want to max out consistency. That's how it works. You want to have Mewtwo turn 1, you want to have the Mega turn 2 using damage change. So it's really important that you hit these things, the compressors, the Mega Turbos, hit your energy themselves, hit your Spirit Links, hit the Stadium. You just need to hit all of these things in the right combination, and that doesn't leave you much space for creativity. So there it is. I hope you enjoy the deck, and we'll be getting into some battles shortly.